Hey guys, how's it going? This is Mike from M&R Automotive. Today we have the Hummer EV and we're going to be swapping out the factory hood mount kit for something a little more powerful. You can install either the standard version or the Pro. The installation and wiring, it's all identical. We're going to install the Pro for an example, but feel free to use the same methods for either model. Alright, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to unclip this cover panel so that way I can get access to bolts in order to remove the light pod cover. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the 7mm screw that's holding this panel down. One thing to note on the Hummer EV, I like to put masking tape here because as you're removing this cover, this black plastic piece gets scratched fairly easy. So if you want to avoid that, go ahead and put some masking tape all over the place, and then we'll remove it after the install. And also get the one on the bottom, because this corner is where you can get most of the scratches. So now that we have the screw removed, we can actually pop this panel up. You're just gonna grab this piece and kind of just get it up, and you just unclip it from the bottom. So good thing we put masking tape here. We'll unclip it on all edges. Try to wiggle this panel out of place. So there's a harness here for the factory light. I'm going to unplug it, and we're not going to reuse the factory harness because it only has a ground and one power strand. We actually need two power sources for the M&R lights, one for powerful white light and one for amber DRL. But we do have to unplug this factory harness. Just press on the tab and separate the two ends. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. So let me show you how to remove this from this panel. If you turn it around, there's a nut here. And the nut is a size 21. There's also a nut inside. It's a 15. So I'm going to slide a wrench in here just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to use my 21 to unscrew it. At the bottom nut, you're just holding in place, so that way they don't spin together in the same way. And on the underneath, I'm actually turning it clockwise because it's upside down, and that's how it removes. Okay, so now we got the nut off. So one thing I'm going to do, cut this wire so that way I can free this nut. And now this is how you separate the factory hood mount kit from the cover panel. So with this Allen key, you're going to back out these two bolts, one on each side, and that's going to free the light from the cradle that it's in. Now we can separate it. And we're going to be reusing this bolt with a hole going through it for our M&R setup. Now we're going to install the M&R cradle, but I do want to point out there is a driver and a passenger side. We did have to design these brackets on a slant, because if you would not have it slanted, it would actually face crooked on the vehicle. So if you look at the D, since we're working on the driver's side, we're going to install it and it's kind of faced this way, so that way when it's on the vehicle, it'll look straight. So there's a curvature on the bracket, and that one is facing forward. We're going to be reusing the factory bolt and nut that we previously removed to secure the U-cradle back in place. So when mounting it, I'm going to go ahead and hold the 21 end, the big nut, from spinning, and then I'll just use a 15 ratchet in order to tighten it. So as you're tightening this bolt, this is where you decide if you want your lights pointing straight or if you want them pointed to the sides to serve as ditch lights. So if you notice there's pattern here on this panel, this will face your lights forward. So if you want your lights to be pointed outward, as you tighten it, all you want to do is just make sure to aim them this way as you tighten these two bolts. So now when you're facing with a vehicle, the lights are going to be slightly angled outward. So now we can actually fit the M&R wiring through that bolt that we've used and secure the pod in this cradle. So now we're going to go ahead and drop these M8 nuts inside these holder places. The way you want to drop them in is with the cone pointing inside, because we're going to be putting screws on the outside to catch them. So now with the supplied hardware, you want to thread it through the eyelid of the U-cradle and into the light. Awesome. So now that we assembled the light to the U-cradle to the factory panel, we can install this back on the truck. So I'm just gonna go ahead and slide this back in place. Be careful not to scratch any of the panels. Now that we have it back in place, it's just clips to pop it back in. Let's go ahead and reinstall that 7mm screw, and we can move towards the passenger side to do the same thing we did on the driver. We're gonna go ahead and unhook the cover and remove it, put it to the side. We're gonna remove the 7mm screw. We're gonna put some masking tape just to prevent any scratches. So on the passenger side, there's also a harness to the light, so we want to unclip it and we'll remove it. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the light from the U-cradle. You can also do it this way instead of the way we did it on the driver's side. This frees the light. I'm going to take off the factory plug. I'm gonna put my 21 wrench. Now, I'm gonna thread this bolt through the M&R cradle. Quick reminder that the rounded edge is facing forward. In the bottom, there's a small gasket and this nut. And another quick reminder, if you want them facing forward, this is where you align the angle. So let me reference the driver's side so that we can see, and so that way they're angled very similar. Now I'm threading the wire inside the factory hollowed out bolt, and we're gonna go ahead and mount the pod onto the cradle. Don't forget to do this step because you won't be able to fit the wire in there afterwards. All right, awesome. Now we can go ahead and install this back on the truck. Align the factory clips. And we're gonna rethread the 7mm bolt. All right, awesome. Now we're ready for wiring. M&R provides a wiring harness in order to bridge the two lights together and bring them to the power source. In this case, we're going to extend our wire to auxiliary switches. I'll show you exactly how I do it. You get two grounding straps, one for the driver's side, one for the passenger. And you get the main harness. This harness offers two power sources. So you have one power source for the amber light, the DRL feature, and one power source for powerful white light. The way we want to wire it, there's a Y intersection in the harness. We want to keep that on the passenger side. Closer to the auxiliary switch hookup, that's the Y intersection. One of the ends gets extended all the way across, and the second end is the one we're going to connect to the auxiliary module. All right, let's go over the wiring. Each light pod has 3 wires. You get the black wire, which is the ground. You get the red wire, which is the power for the powerful white light, and you get the white wire, which is the amber DRL. Everything's color coded, so what you want to do, you want to grab a black wire, which is your grounding strap, and connect it to the black wire on the lights. So we try to make it as simple as possible, having black to black, red to red, and white to white. Make sure you have a nice crimp. And we're going to use one of the bolts on the chassis to ground them. I like to use this bolt here that holds the fender. You can also find plenty of hardware here. The fender bolt out, thread it through the eyelid, and we're going to reinstall the same bolt. So same thing on the wiring harness. I'm going to go red to red and white to white. And once again, the red's going to be the powerful white light, and the white is going to be the amber DRL. Trim? Perfect. Alright, so now one of the ends we're going to extend to the driver's side and connect the 3 wires as well. I'm going to back out the fender bolt. I'm going to slip it through the eyelid and reinstall it. In terms of crimping, we're going to go and follow the colors. So the ground's going to be the black once again. And for the wiring harness, we're going to do the same thing. White to white, red to red. So typically I like to do all my connections, and after I test it, pin it and connect it to the auxiliary button. Then I'm going to go ahead and apply heat to these so that way they can shrivel up and become waterproof connectors. Now that these lights are bridged, let's go ahead back on the passenger side, and we're going to put some pins and connect them to the factory auxiliary buttons. The factory pods were connected on switch number 1 in the auxiliary panel. So I want to show you where they are. We're going to reuse that same wire to give power to our light. So this is the plug. I'm actually going to remove it. You can slide that red piece back, you press on it, and it comes out. But you can see these are the auxiliary switches. So this is switch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So switch number 1 was already used by the factory auxiliary lights. There is a way to unpin it. It's very difficult and you need a special tool. We don't have it. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to cut this light. I'm going to use a crimp connector to provide power, switch number 1, to our harness. For the amber DRL, I'm actually going to pin it on switch number 4. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the factory plug off. So now we got the plug off. We know that the factory pods were on switch number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put a crimp connector on this wire. And just like I mentioned before, there is ways of unpinning these wires from the inside, but you have to have a special tool. So we'll just go ahead and tap into this wire, and that's going to be the power source to the M&R lights. Also, the M&R harness is way longer than we need. We use the same harness for a lot of different vehicles. So I'm going to actually see how much length I have. This is even plenty. I'm going to cut the rest off, and I'm just going to expose some of the wire. So this is the other end of the harness. I'm going to go ahead and strip the ends. So the powerful white light, we're going to reuse the factory wiring. So we already have a crimp connector, and that's going to be the red wire. Okay. Now the white wire amber DRL, I'm going to show you how to put a pin on here, so that way it can go inside the socket and it'll plug back into the module. So I purchased some of these pins to go on the wire to fit this plug. I'm going to put a link in the description below, so that way you guys can see what's necessary to install. But these are the pins that you'll be able to insert it in some of these slots, and they'll come out here and plug in directly to the module. I'm going to put the pin on, and I'm going to crimp it. I'm going to also use some pliers to round out all the crimps, so that way they can fit nice and easy into that plug. Okay. And for the amber DRL, we're going to use plug number 4. So you just pull these out. You can use needle nose pliers, or you can get a pick. So I took out the rubber boot. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to slide this into the opening, and as soon as I see it on this end, I'm going to pull it through with my needle nose pliers. So I see the end of the pin peeking, so I'm going to go ahead and grab some needle nose pliers. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to pull it through. So here I want to show you inside the plug. So you have pin number 1 and pin number 4. We pulled them out until they lock in place. And now we're going to connect the socket back into the auxiliary connection. And the last thing we have to do before we test the product, we actually have to install a relay and a fuse for the additional circuit that we added. So we've added switch number 4. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up the auxiliary module, and you can see here GM only added 1 relay and 1 fuse because they only had one power source for the original hood mount kits. Because our lights have amber DRL, we need 2 power sources. So for every circuit that you add on your aux panels, you have to purchase a relay and a fuse. So if you take a look, this is switch number 1, which was included with the factory hood mount kit. So we want to add a relay for switch 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's going to be the amber DRL. Yeah, so I'm going to add a 10 amp fuse on switch number 4. Because it's only DRL, you could probably even get away with using a 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we can go ahead and test the lights. With switch number 1, we're going to turn on the powerful white light. And with switch number 4, which is a switch that we designated, I'm going to turn on the amber DRL. And this is how you change out the factory pods with the M&R version. And don't forget, you can either do the Pro Series or the Standard Series pods. Same way, same method, same wiring. Thank you guys for watching. I know you guys are going to love the product.